Hello and welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Anastasiya Lavrina. Today we delve into critical geopolitical shifts affecting Israel's security and regional strategy. Recently, the Israeli defense minister's statement that Israel will have freedom of action in Gaza after defeating Hamas has sparked significant debate and raised important questions about the future of the conflict. We'll also discuss Israel's concerns about the stability of the South Caucasus and its attitude to the Azerbaijan-Armenia peace process negotiation. Our distinguished guest now is joining me in the studio. Ambassador of Israel to Azerbaijan, His Excellency George Deek. Warm welcome to our program.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for us to host you again in our studio. So let's talk more about the situation in the Middle East, in the South Caucasus, the expectations from the future administration of the White House. Donald Trump is coming in a few weeks. And the first question, of course, what did the Israeli defense minister mean a couple of days ago when he said that Israel will have freedom of action in Gaza after defeating Hamas?
Israel has been fighting Hamas in Gaza ever since Hamas launched the deadly October 7th attack, massacring, burning, raping thousands of Israelis. And our goal since then has been clear: to remove the threat to Israel from Gaza and to return all our hostages as fast as possible to their families at home. Part of the ensuring that Gaza will not cause or will not pose any threat to Israel and its civilians in the future is learning from our mistakes. One of the mistakes we had before in our perception of the situation in Gaza was allowing Hamas to arm itself and gain the power and the arming and the training and the funding to be able to carry out an attack in the scale of the 7th of October. What our Minister of Defense mentioned in terms of allowing Israel the freedom of action is, just like we agreed now in the ceasefire with Lebanon, so will be always the situation in Gaza, that whenever Israel will perceive there is a threat emanating, whether it is building weapons, ammunition, whether it will be the regrouping of a terrorist cell, etc., Israel will always, even after we have any kind of settlement whatsoever in Gaza, will always preserve the right to act and to take its own sovereign measures against that threat. We will always maintain the freedom of action in Gaza to make sure that no 7 October will happen again in Israel. This is not a theoretical threat. We know that Hamas leaders, even today, are still saying that their goal is to end the war and to regroup and rearm, so that they can do the 7 October attack and again and again and again. That's not my words. That's them saying this exactly in those words. So that's exactly the threat Israel wants to fight and to prevent from happening ever again in the future.
Mr. Ambassador, does it mean that this particular point to be also mentioned in a potential ceasefire agreement? It's
not something negotiable for Israel. The right of Israel to defend itself by itself. It will be true for anywhere. That's one of the lessons we will learn from October 7, that we cannot give our security to anyone else to uphold. It is right for Gaza, it's right for Lebanon, it's right for Syria, it's right for Iran, it's right for anywhere. When we will see a threat, we will act ourselves to remove that threat. And I think what happened in Yemen last night is a demonstration of that. So right now, you're right that there are negotiations taking place for a potential ceasefire in Gaza. And the only reason that's happening is because we still have hostages, 100 hostages, who are held, some alive, some dead, by Hamas in the dungeons of Gaza. We know that they're in a bad condition and we have to get them home to their families. We have among them young children, the two brothers, the redhead brothers, Fir and Ariel, who are 4 years old and 1 year old. And we have elders, people who themselves even went through the Holocaust in the past, who are still held hostage in Gaza. And women and young men, many of them injured, many of them are not feeling well. We've seen, unfortunately, in the past, that when we found some of our hostages in Gaza who were killed by Hamas, for example, one girl was found before she was taken, her weight was around 70 kilograms. When she was found, she was 36 kilograms. So you can imagine the situation they're living under. So we have set this as a priority goal to bring back our hostages back home to their families. Having said that, a ceasefire with Hamas can never be more than a ceasefire. Not only because we don't think we can live side by side with Hamas, but first and foremost because Hamas doesn't want a ceasefire with Israel. Their whole goal is the destruction of Israel. What they're willing is a hudna, a temporary ceasefire, so they can rearm, regroup, and carry out another 7 October. So also from our side, we have taken the decision that Israel cannot afford to live door to door and accommodate a terrorist organization with that kind of level of threat. And therefore, any ceasefire will not give up our goal. And our goals are very clear from the beginning. The dismantling of Hamas as a terrorist organization. Secondly, returning our hostages home. And thirdly, ensuring that never again Gaza will pose any threat to Israel.
Mr. Ambassador, how does Israel plan to manage the growing international tensions, let's say, the pressure which international community is trying to possess over Israel, saying that there is a necessity to reach the ceasefire agreement as soon as possible. So how Israel is trying to manage this pressure with its own security and national interests?
Israel works from a position of very big moral clarity. And moral clarity means that Israel will never surrender and Israel will never compromise its security. Israel will never allow anything that will threaten our population. I want to remind you that we've been under severe international pressure in the last 14 months of the war. They said, don't enter Gaza, and we entered Gaza. They said, don't go into Rafah, we went into Rafah. They said, don't start a campaign against Hezbollah, and we did that. I mention this to emphasize the point that international pressure will not and can never dictate what Israel does or does not. Only the security of the people of Israel will dictate what we do. Having said that, Israel wants peace. That has always been our goal. We are willing to work with the international community to bring peace to the region. But it has to be peace built on Israeli power and strength to defend itself by its enemies, and making sure that no entities that seek Israel's destruction are on the other side. And we are willing to work with the international community, especially with the incoming Trump administration and other actors in the international arena, to broaden the scope of peace and normalization in the region, whether it is with Saudi Arabia or with other countries, so that we can really achieve a better, more peaceful, more prosperous, and more secure Middle East for Jews and Arabs alike.
I should ask a question about the situation in Syria, its implications for Israel, for the Middle East. What the collapse of Assad regime in Syria means for Israel?
Israel is closely monitoring the situation in Syria, and our main goal is to make sure that there's no spillover of the violence or of the instability into Israeli territory. As you know, in 1974, after the war in 73, we signed an agreement with Syria indirectly that creates a buffer zone between our two countries, and in that buffer zone was a UN force called UNDOC. So what happened when the Assad regime fell during the war and the fighting in Syria, they fired towards the UN forces in the buffer zone. So we had to help the UN to protect them. And then we came into the buffer zone so it doesn't fall into the hands of terrorist entities or players who want to harm Israel or to cause instability in the region. And since then, we have went to the highest mountains in the Syrian Golan to make sure that we have the upper ground and to ensure the stability in the region. We have clarified from the beginning that this is a temporary move from Israel. We have no intention of taking territory of the Republic of Syria. And that's a temporary measure taken for as long as needed to ensure Israel's security and the stability in the region, until we know there's someone on the other side, in the Syrian side, who is able and willing to take upon himself the obligations under the 1974 agreement and to make sure there's no threat to Israel. So we know that the situation in Syria is right now presenting some potential hopes, and at the same time it requires a lot of precaution. It provides hope because Syria was an important part of the Iranian axis in the region, building a territorial bridge between Iran and Lebanon, going from Iran to Iraq, and then to Syria, and then Lebanon. And now that Syria is out of Iran's axis, together, and by the way, everyone knows that this could not have been possible without Israel's weakening of Hezbollah, who was protecting the Syrian Assad regime, and Israel's actions against Iran. All of that has made this move possible. And now we have a situation in the Middle East where Hezbollah is not the same Hezbollah, Hamas is not the same Hamas, Iran is not the same Iran, and now Syria is not the same Syria. So that's a good thing in the sense that we took out Syria from the block of the Iranian axis, and now Hezbollah itself, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, said that this has broken the link that allows a resupply of arms to Hezbollah. So that's a good development. On the other hand, we don't know what the future of Syria will look like. We surely hope that the international community will make sure that whoever takes power in Syria will be a responsible actor that will respect all the neighbors, will not pose a threat to the neighbors or allow non-state actors to pose a threat to all its neighbors, including Israel.
That's very interesting. So does it mean that Israel is sure the situation in Syria will definitely affect the position of Iran and can decrease the level of tensions in between of Israel and Iran?
The tensions between Israel and Iran are very high regardless of Syria for a very simple reason. Iran has stated that its declared goal is the destruction of Israel. That's why they have been funding proxies and regimes throughout the entire region on the expense of their own people. The fact is, Iran has spent, in order to sustain the Assad regime in Syria, over 7 years, they spent over $30 billion US. $30 billion US. At the same time, the people in Iran, an energy superpower, don't have access to electricity. As we speak, there is electricity cuts throughout Iran. A country that has some of the biggest water resources in the region cannot provide water for its own people. So instead of investing that money, $30 billion US, into the well-being and the welfare of the Iranian people, they have spent it sustaining the Assad regime, and then in 10 days, it's gone. So all the money of the Iranian people is gone on futile wars with Israel, each of them ending with a devastating and humiliating loss for the Iranian axis. They spent even more money arming, guiding, and paying money for Hezbollah in Lebanon. And now Hezbollah is a shadow of itself. We took the first layer of leadership, the second and the third. The same with Hamas. So all the Iranian people's money has been spent elsewhere instead of on the well-being of the people of Iran. And that definitely weakens Iran in several ways. First, militarily, they don't have the holding in the countries of the region, in the terrorist organizations that they have built. The ring of fire that they wanted to build around Israel basically has collapsed already. Secondly, I think it undermines the position of Iran in the view of the world as an actor that is pushing for lack of stability rather than stability, that pushing for a nuclear bomb, nuclear weapons, which could really destabilize the entire region. And thirdly, in the eyes of the Iranian people themselves, who should wake up and ask, where's our money? Where's our resources? Where's our oil? How come we don't see it? And that, I think, should bring to seeing the day that this regime in Iran will collapse, internally or externally. But at the same time, whether that happens or not, Israel, and I believe the US and the international community, will not allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons. So having that threat in mind of a military action against Iran, plus the maximum pressure campaign that will be reinstated against Iran once the Trump administration comes to power, plus the terrible job the Iranian regime is doing in governing its own people and taking care of their needs, while putting all their money in endless wars that lead nothing but devastation, destruction, and hate in the entire region, that will definitely have a major effect on Iran's position and its tensions with Israel.
Mr. Ambassador, how has Israel's defense and security strategy evolved since October 7th? As far as I know, Israel has heavily invested in advanced missile defense systems, which also affected the processes which we can see today in Gaza.
October 7 was a major wake-up call for Israel. Until then, we thought, with Hamas, for example, the same with Hezbollah, we thought that what they want is to prove that they can govern well, that they can be good rulers for their people. So we allowed them to prosper. We brought in tens of thousands of people from Gaza every day to work in Israel so they can have a better income, a higher salary. We allowed things to go into Gaza that would allow Gaza to develop. And Gaza, if you look at pictures of Gaza before October 7, it was a beautiful place with cafes and playgrounds for kids and beautiful restaurants and very grand hotels. It was a good place. But unfortunately, October 7 proved to us that when our enemies in Gaza or Lebanon or Iran, when they say that they want to kill every one of us and to basically create a massacre of Israelis, that it's not just rhetorics. They literally mean it. And we have to take them seriously. So a lot of things have changed since October 7 in Israel's defense perception. And a lot will change in the future. We're still in the process of learning the lessons of that day and everything that has come. I'll tell you first what our enemies have learned, and then I'll tell you what Israel has learned. Our enemies lived under the perception that that was built on three pillars. First, the Israeli public is not built for long-term wars. After a month or two, the pressure from within will be to, let's reach a ceasefire, we cannot continue, this is bad for the economy, this is bad for the people, this is bad for security, we have to stop. Secondly, they believed that the international pressure will be too big on Israel to stop, and Israel will be basically forced to stop. And third, that the Israeli military will not be able to fight on so many fronts simultaneously, in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Iran, that it's just too much for Israel. And that they hoped would bring about the collapse of Israel. And now all these assumptions were shattered. Israel is fighting for 14 months, and we are in no rush to stop. If our goals are not met, we will continue until our goals and objectives are met. Secondly, our military has conducted extremely successful operations, both in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Iran, we attacked directly in Iran, and Yemen, including last night when we attacked in Yemen. And the people of Israel, which is our major source of strength that our enemies keep underestimating, the people of Israel proved their resilience, their ability to live under a war situation for over a year, without any, what our enemies expected, big waves of immigration, people running away from Israel, etc. None of that has happened. In fact, there are people still coming to Israel to become citizens, Jews from all over the world who are feeling anti-Semitism in the West, in other places, coming today to Israel. And yesterday, the Israeli statistics were published that the willingness of the young people, the new recruits for the army, to go to combat units has been about 120%. Which means there are more people wanting to go to combat units than the maximum those combat units can actually accommodate.
It's also about the power of diaspora, if I'm not mistaken. All of those who live in different parts of the world also support the policy.
Absolutely. And I think the fact that Israel was able to withstand international pressure, including from our friends in the US and others, and to push for what we thought was right, not what others were trying to tell us was right, proved to our enemies and to others that Israel is a sovereign and independent nation, not a pawn by any other power or superpower. Our misconceptions, again, were the ideas that, one, our enemies just want to have better lives and they don't really want to kill us. So we were proven that they would sacrifice the good life of their people in order to kill us. And secondly, the understanding that we cannot rely only on technology. At the end of the day, we need our military to be built not just on technology, which we will increase and use AI and drones probably more than before, but also the human factor of the military has to be increased, which is why you have an internal debate today in Israel about the recruitment of the ultra-Orthodox and others, because we need more soldiers to be able to fight on the ground. Technology in itself is not enough. I think also that's a lesson that we could have learned from the Second Karabakh War of Azerbaijan, that at the end you need people on the ground who are willing to sacrifice their lives and to sacrifice years of fighting for the betterment of their country. So I think there's a lot of similarities over there. And we are certainly going to take those lessons and turn them into a reality. And I hope our enemies will do the same.
Very interesting. You already started to answer my next question about the position of Israel to the situation in the South Caucasus for today. Azerbaijan and Armenia have negotiations which held about 4 years about the final peace agreement to bring the well-expected and desired peace to the region of the South Caucasus. So what are Israel's main concerns regarding the stability in the South Caucasus and its attitude to Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process?
I come from Israel, and in our country and in our region, there's a lot of people coming from outside, from foreign countries, telling us what we should do, what we shouldn't do, what is the right thing, what is the wrong thing. So we know a thing or two about foreign powers coming and telling you what you need to do. We're not in that position in the Caucasus. We have nothing in our heart that we wish for except the well-being of the people of this region. We are not going to pretend like we're a superpower who can dictate the terms of the negotiations between Azerbaijan, Armenia, or anyone else. But I will tell you this. Our interests in the region are very much tied to our strong strategic relations and friendship with Azerbaijan and with the people and the government of Azerbaijan. And this will continue to be a major pillar of our position in the Caucasus. And we will always make sure that our relationship with Azerbaijan will always continue to be on the highest levels and on a strategic level. And at the same time, we will continue to do whatever we can, and we're trying to help as well in that sense, sometimes more quietly than publicly, in trying to mitigate and make sure that the people the people of Azerbaijan and the people in Armenia and the people in Georgia, all the people in the South Caucasus can have a more peaceful life and to try to achieve an agreement that will allow between Azerbaijan and Armenia that will allow all peoples to live peacefully side by side to prosper. I think the next generation, both in the Middle East but also here in the South Caucasus, deserves to live in peace, to live in stability, to live in a world where they can achieve their dreams and not just fight enemies, but actually fulfill ambitions and dreams. The world is moving in such a fast pace from AI. I mean, every day now ChatGPT and others are announcing another development. And here we are talking about territory and the wars of the past. But we have to take out the bad guys to make sure that we can live a good life and our children will continue to grow. I will tell you one more thing before we end. I came here 5 years ago. I was here before the Second Karabakh War. And I've seen the level of support by Israel, my government, and by my people to the Azerbaijani people when they were in their hour of need in 2020, the Second Karabakh War. I've seen the support on the institutional level, on the security level, as well as on the people level in Israel. And I always felt very proud that as an Israeli we could be there for our friends. But I have to tell you now, after this war, I'm also very proud to represent not just Israel in Azerbaijan, but also Azerbaijan in Israel as a goodwill ambassador, because this country has proven itself to be a very truthful, reliable, and good friend for Israel. I still remember the pouring of support, of care by the Azerbaijani people who came to the embassy to lay flowers at the first days after the October 7th. And I also appreciate deeply the position of the government of Azerbaijan, who refused to succumb to any kind of pressure from outside to join the anti-Israel campaign. So I'm very proud after 5 years to say I've seen both countries in their most testing hours, and both countries has proven to be true friends to each other.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, thank you. Thank you very much for your answers, for joining Inside Politics today. It was a real pleasure to know more about the situation in the Middle East and your attitude to the situation in our region, in the South Caucasus.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you, dear viewers, for watching Inside Politics. Stay with us and see you in the next edition.